Hello, extended frightful family, and welcome back to Thorgyween, our full, however long this has been going on for, celebration of everything spooky and scary in video games. But I don't just love scary video games, I also love scary movies. Every single October, I try and watch a brand new horror film every single day, but I also like to return to some of my older favorites. And one horror film that over the years has continued to grow on me is Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Now, I saw this film a long time ago, and when I first saw it, I thought it was scary. I thought it was creepy, but I didn't really appreciate it. However, as time has gone on, I've really come to understand that this is far more than just a spooky grindhouse horror film. The filmmaking of it is genius because it feels so real. It feels less like you're watching a movie and more like you're just following a group of friends who just happened to come across the wrong house in Texas. But also, it has a lot to say. It's a great snapshot of that time in America, and it makes a lot of commentary about older ideals versus the new generation. And I really think that a lot of people do not appreciate everything that is going on in that movie. But on top of all of that, the thing that impresses me the most about Texas Chainsaw Massacre is that it's got this really clever level up mechanic that makes it so that every single character feels unique and rewarding in their own way, so that way you want to— wait a minute.
Yes, folks, today we're going to be talking about the Texas Chainsaw Massacre game, a brand new asymmetrical multiplayer game based on a horror film because it's 2023 and that is indeed the style at the time. However, we're in good hands on this one because this game was published by Gun Interactive, the same publishers as that Friday the 13th game from 2017 that Friday fans really loved and was a great tribute to that series. Then again, they were just the publishers, and that typically means they just put up the money for the game and maybe they contributed some ideas. The important name here is the developer, Sumo Interactive, who previously brought us such titles as those Sonic racing games and Little Big Planet 3. That is in no way a sign of this game's quality. I just think it's funny that the same team behind Sonic and Sackboy brought Leatherface to life. But as weird as that matchup might sound, they actually did a pretty damn fine job on this title. All year long I've heard people praising this game, even people who aren't fans of the film, because they managed to take a grungy tale of survival and turn it into a really engaging competitive multiplayer game. So let's go ahead and dive into this game and see what makes it so special. As soon as it begins, you're treated to a title crawl, which gives you the basic premise of the game.
April 1973. Tragedy and despair have struck Central Texas. A young college student named Maria Flores has seemingly vanished without a trace.
Hey, wait a minute, that's not John Larroquette doing a bad Orson Welles impersonation. Is this really a Texas Chainsaw Massacre game? I rescind my complaint, carry on.
The game acts as something of a spiritual successor to the film with a very similar plot. It once again focuses on a group of friends who go searching through Texas after hearing stories about a woman who went missing, because if you heard stories about people being abducted by someone with a flesh mask, who wouldn't want to go and see that for themselves? It's Texas in the 1970s and the internet doesn't exist yet. What else are you going to do for fun? Well, surprise, surprise, these new kids find themselves captured and strung up in a basement, and now they have to escape before they become the secret ingredient in the famous Sawyer family chili. Each survivor has skill trees that they can level up to give them additional buffs, but each of them starts out with one special ability that is unique to them. Maybe they can tackle the opponent to temporarily stun them, maybe they're really good at hearing so they can hone in on the enemy's locations, or maybe they're extra skilled at opening locks so they can open up doors faster. The variety of perks that these characters have all feel pretty decent. They make them feel distinct, but at the same time, they're each pretty good in their own way. And because of that, this game does what any good multiplayer game should do. Whenever I go into a match, if someone else wants to be the character that I wanted to be, I'm never bummed about because I always have at least two other characters that I'm okay playing as. Now, as the survivor, your job is to, well, survive. Which is going to be difficult because considering that you awoke after being tenderized and hung up, you're not exactly in fighting shape. So all you can do is try to escape. And this is the game's biggest strength to me. The path to freedom is a true challenge. You start off in this underground maze with Leatherface already patrolling the area for you, and anytime that you make even the tiniest sound, the Sawyer family can spot you, so you have to sneak around, avoiding multiple alarms that have been set up. But you can find piles of bones scattered around the map, because it's the Sawyer farm and they just happen to have a bunch of those laying around, and you can pick those bones and then use them to disarm these traps. You can also find healing items, which is important because you start the match already injured, and even if you never run into any of the enemies, you're constantly bleeding out, so you have to keep healing yourself back up. And more importantly, you can find lockpicks to help you open the doors, of which there are multiple between you and freedom. However, every time that you start searching for items, opening doors, or taking almost any action, you'll start making noises. If the noises get too high, then the sawyers can hear you. You can prevent this by going nice and slow, but that's when the game reminds you this is indeed a horror game. Because when you're performing actions like unlocking doors or looking through toolboxes, you can't move the camera around, meaning the enemy could be sneaking right up behind you and you would never know. So when I'm performing these actions, it's one of the tensest experiences I've had in any game this year, because you need to go fast so that way the enemy can't sneak up on you, but if you go too fast, they'll know where you are. So it's this stressful balance that you have to play of going just the right speed so that way you can get out of there, but making sure that way you don't alert them, but for all you know, because you can't move the camera around, they could already be standing right behind you. Don't be confused by the fact this is a multiplayer game. This still does what any good horror game should do. It makes you unsure if you're ever actually safe. And the game does an amazing job of ramping up that tension the closer you get to the exit, because when you start underground, all you have to worry about is Leatherface. But unlike most asymmetrical multiplayer games where it's one player versus a team, there's 3 people on the Sawyer side, and once you leave the basement, you now have to deal with the entire family. Then, depending on what map you're on, you'll need to accomplish other objectives to open up additional barriers keeping you from escaping, including disarming traps, opening more doors, navigating through additional mazes, or even going through electric fences. The first time that I made it to the exit gate in a game, I was so excited to finally get out there, and then when I saw the gate was electrified, my stomach sank. It might sound weird to say a competitive multiplayer game can be a successful horror game, but it does create that sense of suspense and even dread that a good horror game needs. It pulls off a wonderful balance of filling you with hope whenever you make it past one hurdle, only to knock you back down again when you get to the next challenge. And as you can tell from all that, stealth is the name of the game. As a survivor, your goal is to sneak and never get noticed, and I'm saying this as someone who admittedly sucks at stealth games and is not a fan of stealth games and doesn't play a lot of stealth games. I think the stealth in this game is pretty good. The slow crouching walking speed feels good, the sound mechanic works exactly as it should. I've never done something in this game and said, oh, that shouldn't have alerted them. No, when I did something wrong in this game, I instantly knew it, and when I got in trouble, it felt like it was because of something I did, not because the game was just being too hard. Escaping is difficult, but none of the game's mechanics feel unfair or frustrating. No, if you want frustrating, just look to your teammates. Holy crap, this is easily the most discouraging thing about this game. We've all played those team-based games where other players wouldn't stick to the objective, they'd run off and do their own thing, spawn in their own area of the map rather than being with the rest of the team. That's what you have to expect when you're playing these games, and normally I wouldn't really feel like that's something that you have to bring up. But there's just something extra irritating about playing with people who don't understand the concept of sound. I have played with so many people who the second the match begins, they start trying to speedrun their escape using the bull in a china shop technique. And shockingly enough, yeah, that never really works out for them. There's one other mechanic that you have to look out for that I haven't mentioned yet, and that's that there is an unplayable 4th member of the Sawyer family, Grandpa Sawyer. And the films, they say that Grandpa was the best killer who ever lived, but apparently what that translates to in-game is that he's Daredevil. Grandpa will occasionally moan, and when he does, he can see any player that's moving around. So when you hear that ghostly wail, it's time to play red light, green light. But when you make noises, it'll alert Grandpa. And the more alert he becomes, the more he levels up. And the higher level he is, the more often he'll moan. And once you get him to max level, he'll just know where you are at all times, and the rest of the Sawyer family will be able to see you no matter where you are. And I'm bringing this up because I have been put on teams where people were so impatient, they would level up Grandpa literally as soon as the match began.
None of this has anything to do with how good or bad the game actually is. I just want to take this moment to make the public service announcement that if you're playing as a survivor, stop making noises. That's how you lose. We now return you to your review already in progress.
So yeah, I actually think the survivor role in this game is incredibly fun. It's one of the better asymmetrical multiplayer experiences that I've had in a while. So, how about playing as the Sawyer family? Well, just like the survivors, the Sawyers each have their own unique abilities. The cook can hear you wherever you are, the hitchhiker can set up traps and wriggle around through small openings, and Leatherface has a chainsaw. I don't know what else you were expecting from that one. Now, there's two things worth pointing out about the cast of the Sawyers. First is that there's two new characters made just for this game. Johnny, a serial killer who has the power to track your blood if you've been injured near him, and Sissy, a Manson-style cult member who can blow out clouds of poison. These two characters were actually co-created by Kim Hinkle, the screenwriter of the original film. So even though I will admit I don't really think these two characters feel like they fit in with the rest of the Sawyers, hey, if Hinkle says they're family, they're family. Although I should note, I've been calling them the Sawyers this whole time, but the game just refers to them as the family, because this game is based off the first film and they didn't get their name until the sequel, which is in its own weird legal limbo situation. That's why they had to create brand new characters for this game rather than using other notable members of the Sawyer family like Chop Top or Matthew McConaughey. Yes, I know he had a name in that movie, but let's be real, we all just refer to him as Matthew McConaughey. Alright. But the other thing worth knowing about the Sawyers is that on a team of 3, someone has to be Leatherface. And I totally get the logic behind that. I mean, he's the big icon of the whole franchise. Nobody went into this game saying, boy, I can't wait to play the cook. Although, I have run into problems where I have actually gone into multiple matches that wouldn't start because nobody wanted to be Leatherface. And I can't really blame anyone for saying that because, I gotta admit, I don't really want to be Leatherface in this game. But then again, I'm not really the biggest fan of anyone in this family. I mentioned earlier that there are multiple members of the survivors who I enjoy playing as. I can't really say the same for the Sawyers. I played as them to check them out, but then the only reason that I kept playing as them was just so I could get footage for this video. I had a way better time playing as the survivors. And it's not because I'm bad with the Sawyers. I mean, I probably am, but I'd say I'm equally bad with the Sawyers and with the survivors, so it's not about a difference in skill level. No, my problems with the family are entirely based around the gameplay. When it comes to the actual movement, they feel kind of stiff to me, which, in all fairness, look at the way they run. Now, I've seen the films, and yeah, that's probably an accurate depiction of how the cook would run. But the game feels the way that looks. It feels like you're controlling someone with lower back pain. However, when it comes to making attacks, it actually feels too loose. Like, anytime that I would swing my weapon, even if I felt like I was right on top of them, I would still end up missing, and I'm sure that it's mostly just a lack of experience on my part, that I've just played other games where if I was standing that close then it would hit, but in this game you have to be even closer, or you have to make sure that you're turning at a particular angle. So I'm sure that if I put way more time into the game, then I wouldn't have that problem, but yeah, it almost felt like, and this is going to be a weird metaphor, but just go with me, it felt like the attack equivalent of walking on ice. Like I would swing, and then it would just go sliding right past them. But that's not the most frustrating thing about playing as the Sawyers. As I mentioned, this game at its core is a stealth game. The survivors are meant to hide, and this game gives them plenty of opportunities to do that. The maps are huge, and they are incredibly detailed, and there's so many different places where you can hide or crawl through a little opening so that way the Sawyers can't get to you, and that is great for the survivors. But for the Sawyers, that just meant that the vast majority of every single one of my matches was just walking around and looking for them. And the moment that I actually found one of the survivors, it didn't last long. As I said, the hits feel very loose, it feels kind of hard to connect them, but the moment you start connecting them, the game is over. You can end that match almost immediately once you actually start making contact. So once you actually start getting hits in, there's really no challenge to taking them down. The challenge is just in finding them, and that is so boring to me. Again, I don't know if it's my own personal preference on this one, I can't speak for everyone out there, but yeah, just walking around these big, massive maps, just looking for people, it just wasn't interesting to me, and whenever a survivor ended up escaping, it didn't feel like there was any tension in that. It didn't feel like I was racing them down to try and keep them from escaping. No, it felt like I was just taking a very scenic tour of this farmland, and then all of a sudden the match was just over. Again, I realize that this is a stealth game, so I can kind of see the appeal of this. The appeal of this isn't really to defeat the survivors, it's just to find them. So that's where all the challenge is. But none of that really feels rewarding to me. I would far prefer something in which maybe the survivors had more health, maybe it was harder to take them down, but there were fewer places for them to hide, fewer ways for them to escape in the middle of a chase. So that way, it basically just led to more interactions per game. And again, I could just be speaking for myself. I'm sure that there are a lot of people out there who really do enjoy the way that the killers play. However, that's not been my experience because, as I said, I didn't enjoy playing as the killers, so most of the footage that you're seeing, I just forced myself to do this so that way we would have footage for this video. And I had so many matches that refused to start because nobody wanted to be the killers. As I said, I ran into a couple of matches that wouldn't start because we would have a full team, but nobody wanted to be Leatherface. But the vast majority of the matches I had just didn't start at all because even though you only need 3 members of the Sawyers, we couldn't get that. The survivors filled out quick. There were always 4 of them just right there, ready to go. But we would have to wait so long for 3 members of the Sawyers to show up. And I can only assume it's because maybe the Sawyers just aren't that fun to play. And what makes that worse is that this game takes so long to start. Most multiplayer games like this that I have experience with, they tend to give you like 30 seconds, 1 minute, 90 seconds to get ready, 2 minutes tops. This game gives you 3 minutes to get ready. So okay, already kind of a wait, but so many people would go into a match, ready up, and then the other people wouldn't ready up, so they would get tired of waiting the 3 minutes and they would just leave, and that would cause the 3 minutes to reset, and now we wouldn't have a full team. I feel like if you only gave us 1 minute to wait, we wouldn't really run into that problem all that much. But then after you finally get a match to work, then you gotta wait on the loading screen, which alright, that makes sense. But then you gotta wait as it gives you the instructions on what your goals are for the match. You know, as if you hadn't seen that a dozen times already. And then every single character has their unique intro animation, and you gotta sit through that. There's nothing that you can do about the load times, I get that, and in all honesty, I'm pretty sure that those instructional intros that show you what your goals are, those are probably just there to hide even more loading time, so I can understand that too. But for God's sakes, you don't need 3 minutes to wait for a match to begin. Get that down to 1 minute and we would have had far more matches start. I am not kidding you when I say, I tried to get more footage of playing as the Sawyers for this video. I spent 2 hours just trying to play as the killers. I got 4 matches. And I had about 10 that refused to start, and eventually we had to get kicked back to the menu because we couldn't get a full team of Sawyers. And I can't help but think a lot of that is because they just got tired of waiting 3 minutes. So in the end, I believe this game is one half an amazing survival game that requires tons of concentration and work but feels so rewarding when you manage to progress and even win. And the other half is just an okay slasher movie simulator. But that's just me. I have heard other people out there who have said that they prefer playing as the Sawyers, so clearly some people get more out of it than I did. But even if I hated playing as the Sawyers, I would still enjoy playing this game just for the survivors. This is a game that I would gladly keep returning to just for that experience.
So the game is great. I honestly think they made the best possible multiplayer Texas Chainsaw Massacre game that they possibly could have made. But there is one big final complaint that I have about the game, and this is nothing against the devs, this is nothing against anyone involved in the game, but it's just something that bugs me and I just have to put out there. I really just kind of hate that this had to be a multiplayer game to begin with. Because, don't get me wrong, I want to encourage people to try different things in video games. I want to encourage people out there to go, hey, we've got this property, let's do something interesting and new with it. But let's be real, everybody. We all know that's not why this is a multiplayer game. We all know that they turned Texas Chainsaw Massacre into a multiplayer game because they're trying to get on that live service bandwagon. They're trying to jump on board with all the other live services because they believe that's how you make a whole bunch of money. We all know that's what's happening here. Let's not try and hide it. And while I do applaud the developers for making the best possible live service Leatherface Texas Chainsaw Massacre game they possibly could have made, I don't think that's what this game should have been, because, yeah, this is a good Texas Chainsaw Massacre game. But I will always stand by saying that the best Texas Chainsaw Massacre game is Resident Evil 7. That game has a lot of different horror influences, but it wears its Texas Chainsaw Massacre influence on its sleeve. It is dripping with Texas Chainsaw Massacre influence all over the place. And here's the thing. So many people jump on board the live service bandwagon because they believe that's how you can make all the money. Everybody's making money off of live services now. I'm gonna say something that might shock a couple of those people. Evil Dead, 2 years ago, thought they could jump on the live service bandwagon. And they put out an Evil Dead multiplayer game. And you know what? Fans said it was good. Critics said it was good. A lot of people enjoyed that game. It has been less than 2 years since it came out. And at the moment, there are only about 10 people playing it at any given time on Steam. And also, they've stopped working on it. They made the announcement just this month that they were not going to put out any more content for that game. That Switch version that they promised, it's not coming now. And that's because, yeah, you can make a lot of money off live service games. And then they die. And then they're just gone. And then nobody is playing them anymore. And then they are just, that's it. No more. Never again. Just gone. However, Resident Evil 7 came out almost 7 years ago. And at any given time, there's about 500 people playing that game on Steam. Still, to this day, almost 7 years later. That's insane. But you know why that's special? Because that means it's not just the same people going back and replaying it again and again and again. That means there's still, to this day, new people buying the game. That means Resident Evil 7 came in here with a really good single-player survival horror game that is heavily inspired by Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and it is still a success. And it's still selling, and it's still making money after all this time. And do you know why? It's because if a live service game starts to die, if a multiplayer game starts to die, nobody's going to buy it anymore, because why would you buy a multiplayer game when there aren't multiple players left? You don't have to worry about that with Resident Evil 7, because you can buy it and just play it anytime that you want and not have to worry about anybody else, because it's a great single player experience. So yeah, I'm sorry. I know that, again, it sounds like I'm coming in here and wagging a finger at the devs. No, the devs were told making multiplayer Texas Chainsaw Massacre game, they made the best one they possibly could have. I applaud them for that. It just drives me nuts that so many people out there still to this day are trying to turn everything into live services because they just want to make a bunch of money, and yet we have proven time and time and time again that's not how you make a whole bunch of money. Single player games do sell continuously over the course of years, and yet horror games specifically keep going back to the multiplayer live service option. I mean, we had Friday the 13th, we had Evil Dead, we've got Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Coming up next year, we've got Killer Clowns from Outer Space. They're getting a multiplayer game. And yet, when it comes to single-player games based on horror movies, in the past decade, the only ones we've gotten have been Blair Witch, that's a depressing thought to go out on.
Vampires, ghosts, werewolves, and zombies. Your donuts are ready.
We've come for your freaky floats.
What's the magic word?
Well, blast your puny planet to smithereens!
It was trick or treat.
I was going to say that next.